And now, everyone, this is it. It is now time that we will cap this episode off with the grand finale. And for this one, I just want to go and state this right now. I know that it has been years since I have ultimately retired that whole thing about being angry about Sony Pictures and Sony Pictures Animation. I am aware that in the past, I did carry that thing a little too far to the point where it ended up hurting some people that did not deserve it, which is why I ultimately decided to go and quit that whole thing, quit being angry at not just Sony, but with any other studios, and to treat Sony Animation and view their movies equally to other studios, rather it be like with Disney, Pixar, Illumination, DreamWorks, or what have you. So I've pretty much worked my way back and reformed myself with my perspective at Sony. Now, some of my opinions have not changed. I am still not a fan of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I still think those movies are terrible. I am still not a fan of Hotel Transylvania. In fact, I think those movies are crap, but I am aware that is just my opinion. And just my opinion alone. And I think with Sony Animation right now, with the movies that they have been doing, they have been going much better than what they used to do. But I think things have now changed, and I think it is time that I would have to awaken that sleeping giant. And this is something that I know there will be people on my side with this. And I know that I won't be hurting anybody who doesn't deserve this on this thing. Because what Sony Pictures, what they want to try to pull off right now, they need to be called out on this. This needs to be addressed, that what they're doing is not only stupid, but flat out wrong, and I'd even say flat out cruel. And what I'm talking about is the way that Sony Pictures seems to be doubling down on AI. Now, for those of you who haven't heard, during the weekend, or at least close to the weekend, the CEO of Sony Pictures Entertainment, Tony Vinciquerra, he was on an investors event for the Sony Corporation, and he revealed that he is going to be using AI, or at least the company will primarily be using AI as a tactic in order to go and cut down costs on their films and shows. In fact, to go and read you here from my source on IndieWire, it is actually stated, and this is a quote coming from Tony Vinciquerra, to which he stated, "We are very focused on AI. The biggest problem with making films today is the expense. We will be looking at ways to produce both films for theaters and television in more efficient ways using AI primarily." He would then go and actually bring awareness to the fact that last year we had not one, but two whole strikes about it with the actors and writers strike. And he is aware about it. And on top of that, there is also some negotiations with the entertainment union, which is like the big union that connects like all the other entertainment unions, like the writing union and the acting union together, the IATSE, or at least I think that's like the big union for film crews, in which he stated that he acknowledges that the IATSE and Teamsters are currently negotiating in relation to AI and how that would not screw over workers. To which he has stated that the agreement that came out of last year's strikes and the agreement that come out of the IATSE and Teamsters negotiations will define roughly what we can do with AI. And from there, the article would then go and discuss about the possibility of what would happen if Sony Pictures would go and buy Paramount. But as we have just talked about with the recent agreement with Skydance, that is most likely not going to happen. So those discussions, I mean, like, that's pretty much thrown out the window. So we don't have to concern ourselves with Sony and Paramount. But what we do have to concern ourselves now is with Sony and the possibility that they want to become dependent on using AI as a cost-saving tactic. And let me just say right now, how cruel it is for Sony Pictures to be aware of how people feel about AI, to listen to what actors and writers have to say about AI and how they're completely against it and how they don't want that technology to go and replace their jobs, and yet they still want to move forward anyways, that they still want to go and use AI in order to go and cut down their costs. But even though they're being a little bit vague about it, you know what that actually means. That Sony Pictures wants to unironically replace some people's jobs with AI. And I know that technically it's not necessarily all jobs that they would be able to go and full-on replace. It is true that there are certain groups of people that will be protected from this. I think it is safe to say that there aren't going to be any producers or directors that will be losing their jobs over this. They are going to be fine. And then there are also the actors and the writers, where thanks to the strike in which they have won and managed to get an agreement out of, that did address that issue, they will also be fine as well. But you know who hasn't gotten an agreement in order to address that issue? You know the ones that right now, they are going to be screwed over the most? Artists and animators. And I know one place in particular that Sony Pictures will be targeting in order to use that technology. Sony Pictures ImageWorks. You guys probably know what that is. It is the animation and visual effects facility in Vancouver that Sony Pictures and other studios as well, they would go to in order to get some visual effects and for animation. Sony Pictures especially would go to that place in order to provide the visual effects for their big blockbusters, such as the new Venom movie, in which the trailer just came out. And they would be the ones who would actually do the animation for Sony Animation's movies. Yes, technically there is the Sony Pictures animation in Culver City in California, and that one is actually unionized with the Animation Guild, but that one doesn't necessarily count. Those animators in there, they only work on the foundation of the movies that they would go and produce. The place where they would actually make the animation is in Vancouver, where they would be far away from any unions. In a way, it's kind of like the Animation Guild representation at Sony Animation. That's kind of like virtue signaling. It seems very weird and honestly kind of messed up, where they would simultaneously have some union representation at their animation studio, but at the place where they would actually make animation, that's just a place where Sony Pictures could have some union dodging tactics so that they can make their animated films on the cheap. And from there, and especially with the fact that right now, there are no unions that are in place at Sony Pictures ImageWorks, let alone in the vast majority of Vancouver. You know that's going to be the place where Sony Pictures would want to go and they would place their AI technology, and that they could get away with it because there's nothing, there's no laws, there's no rules that they would have to go and abide to go and protect animators' rights. Sony Pictures couldn't care less about animators' rights. So, of course, they would go and look upon them in order to go and use AI in order to cut down costs. I mean, where else could they legitimately use AI for those tactics? Where else where they would want to go and save money, especially nowadays when visual effects and animation can be so stupidly expensive, especially in the case of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I know that they would go and toot out that they only did this at $100 million budget, but reports actually came out stating that the budget is actually much closer to $150 million, more expensive than most of the other Sony animation films. So in that regards, of course, they would look upon that factor in order to go and cut down costs. And not to mention, this is also an extremely problematic factor in terms of what the future holds for Sony's movies. Because keep in mind, Sony Pictures still has a whole bunch of anticipated projects. And the fact that now they want to use AI in order to cut down costs, it kind of makes you wonder, what are going to be those movies that will suddenly have AI? Is the Legend of Zelda movie that they are going to be producing, is that going to have some AI featured into it? Or what about any of their upcoming Spider-Man projects? Is that also going to include some AI? Who the fridge knows? But especially, and not to mention, considering that some of their recent Spider-Man films, like Madam Web and Morbius, have been big box office bombs, maybe Sony would be looking upon on how they could save on the budget of those films by using AI. That could be a possibility. But then there is one that was often highlighted, and the biggest concern that people have is Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse. Many people have been extremely worried if Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse might actually include some AI in the animation. In fact, this article from IndieWire, even like the first comment they put out is by saying the next Spider-Verse film may have a new animation style, AI. And that spreaded the rumor during the weekend if Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse might actually have some AI animation. And at that point, holy crap, was the internet panicking. Like, I have actually seen some legitimate comments from people where they said that they're ready to just abandon Spider-Verse all... Oh, excuse me, folks. But they would say that they would just abandon Spider-Verse altogether. That they are ready to just drop the franchise, that they're ready to just accept that there's only two great Spider-Verse movies, and that the other one doesn't count because, well, we don't want to support AI and we don't want to go and watch that movie. And keep in mind, like, many of them have been like die-hard Spider-Verse fans, and even they're prepared to just drop the third movie altogether, not care about it because of that possible use of AI. Like, it was really a rumor that was going around that was legitimately putting the future of that movie that was once considered one of the most anticipated films that we currently have right now in jeopardy. Which is why one of the writers and producers, Chris Miller, had to go and address it. That he had to go on social media, and by the way, this is an article from The Wrap. He had to go on Twitter and had to address those rumors about the possibility that that Beyond the Spider-Verse might have AI. And here is what he stated, reading from my source here on The Wrap, directly from his Twitter post, as he states, "There is no generative AI in Beyond the Spider-Verse, and there never will be. One of the main goals of the films is to create new visual styles that have never been seen in a studio CG film, not steal the generic plagiarized average of other artists' work." So he is pretty much confirming here that no, Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse will not have any AI included whatsoever, which honestly is good. And I'm not gonna lie, like, when I first heard the news about Sony wanting to use AI in order to cut down costs, that was one of the things I was worried about. You know, I was worried about Beyond the Spider-Verse, and not to mention, like, with whatever future Sony animation movies that they may have. I mean, who knows? Maybe that goat movie that I just talked about from Sony Animation, maybe that could also include some AI. Who knows? I could be wrong. But the thing is, with Beyond the Spider-Verse, like, I knew that's going to be something that will cause some serious panic, especially amongst the animation community. That is something that I knew that Phil Lord and Chris Miller better go and actually address this, because that is going to be a serious problem that would put not just the movie in jeopardy, but even their reputations in complete jeopardy whatsoever. Like, that's going to be the one major thing that will make even the most angriest Disney hater to go and say that Sony should sell the Spider-Man rights to Disney. Like, it would be something that is that bad. But thankfully, I will give Chris Miller credit that he did manage to go and address the issue. He did manage to go and state that there won't be any AI that would go and touch it. Now, let's just hope that his word will be enough to make Sony executives back off, and not to make any of his bosses go and actually make him change his mind and to go and force that AI technology onto it. And I mean, especially with the behind the scenes stories that we have heard that allegedly Phil Lord is just a complete nightmare to work with, and that he would just absolutely waste money and time on productions just because of his personal work ethic. Like, honestly, in that regard, I can imagine how Sony would want to use AI in order to work around that. But still, though, it looks like for now we do have a confirmation that no, Beyond the Spider-Verse is safe and it won't have any AI. But still, though, I think this is a massive statement that Sony Pictures should legitimately pay attention and should tell them that maybe they should go and back away from any use of AI. Because if one of their filmmakers have to step up and make a statement that they are not going to do the thing on their movie what their bosses want to do with their business, with their movies and shows, then that is a sign of how bad AI is for their actual business. And that is the biggest problem why we need to go and actually address this right now. This is why, like, we need to go and call this out as soon as possible before any damages can legitimately be done. Because it's more of an irony situation. Because Sony Pictures may think that they can use AI in order to go and save money and make it easier for their movies to be profitable, but in reality, it could be something that will screw them over and it will cost them far more than any of their movies or any of the shows that they have ever produced. Because there are many people, I would even say most people, would just abandon a project altogether because there is a use of AI in there. And because of that, this could be a strategy that I can easily imagine this could legitimately put Sony Pictures in jeopardy. That not only are there going to be those job losses that will, I feel like it will guarantee happen because they want to replace people with AI, but also this is going to be a case where it's not going to work out. No matter how much money they would save on the budgets of films and shows, they're still going to end up becoming tremendous failures altogether, because there is going to be a significant amount of people that will want to boycott it because of its use of AI. And even if it wouldn't be something that would actually screw them over, even if their tactics would somehow work on that, it would mean some very negative consequences in the Hollywood system altogether. Because the worst case scenario, because honestly, this is not like the worst case scenario is that it would ruin Sony Pictures altogether and just shut that whole thing down. No, the worst case scenario is if it works and Sony would be able to legitimately save money on that, because then it would influence other companies to go and try to do the same thing for their projects, like with Universal, with Disney, with Paramount, with Lionsgate, with Netflix, with Amazon, with Apple, with all those companies that they would pay attention and that they would enforce AI onto their technology and replace some of their employees with that tech so that they would go and make more AI generated content. That's the big thing that honestly, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be called out. And we need to make sure this does not happen. And the fact that Sony Pictures would still do so anyways without even caring about any of their employees, I think like this is the worst thing about this news. This is really an update to say that the executives at Sony Pictures just doesn't care. They don't care about the people making their films. They don't care about the people whom they are working for. They don't care about their rights. They don't care about their safety. They don't care about their well-being. They only care about the money. And they are very straightforward with why are they doing this? Because they want to go and save costs. And when executives talk about that they want to cut down costs, it means cutting down jobs. So the factor that Sony Pictures would unironically get out of their way to go and replace people with AI, no. That is a line that I feel like it is massively crossed. And I feel like this is something that whatever Sony is going to be planning, honestly, this would legitimately be a call for boycott. Like, I know, yeah, like for now we know that Beyond the Spider-Verse is safe from this, but that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for any of their other projects. I think other filmmakers working at Sony Pictures right now, they got to go and do the same thing. Like Stephen Curry right now has to go and address that Goat would not have AI. Or if that Wes Ball needs to go and address that there won't be AI in the Legend of Zelda movie. If not, then there's going to be a lot of speculations of which Sony project might have AI and which ones might have not. Because I can tell you already, this decision is going to really screw them over. And I would even say, and like I said before, this is a case where this could this could fully ruin Sony Pictures altogether. And again, that's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is if this strategy actually works. And the sooner we call them out, the sooner we make their PR a living nightmare about it, the more likely that they will go and drop this. At least Chris Miller did manage to go and address this as a problem, and hopefully later Sony Pictures will soon, because this right here, this makes them a freaking garbage company. It makes them a freaking garbage company that doesn't care about their people, that only cares about their money in order to make garbage products. And so with that said, now I would like to go into the chat wall, and I'd like to ask you all, what do you all think about the news of Sony Pictures wanting to double down on AI for the sake of cutting down costs, for the sake of saving money? Let me know what you all think on that. All right. Now, I want to say right now that I am not one of those people who would bash Sony, as I try to treat the studio the same as all other studios. But this news here is flat out wrong by Sony. Sony is the only studio that keeps their productions lower, resulting in some successes like Garfield, Spider-Verse, and live-action films like Anyone But You. But using AI for future films is flat out wrong, and it'll end up encouraging studios like Disney to do the same thing in using AI. This is wrong. Exactly. Anyways, I'm seriously frustrated about this news. However, it's because Sony is one of the few studios that actually doesn't spend that much money on their feature films in the first place. They were able to produce films like Morbius and Ghostbusters Afterlife on a $75 million budget, way less than most tentpoles, and outside of Spider-Man No Way Home, I can't remember the last time they spent more than $200 million on a movie. They already seem to know how to save money. So how much more do they want to save? You actually brought up an amazing point. Sony Pictures is one of the last studios out there that would want to legitimately do this. They don't have a legitimate reason in order to spend so much, in order to find ways in order to save money. Right now, that is currently a Disney and Warner Brothers problem. Like right now, it's Disney and the WB that has to look for ways in order to go and save money, because most of their movies have been box office bombs because they spend way too much on the budget. They bet way too big on them, and in some cases, it has screwed them over, especially with what happened last year. And in the case of Warner Brothers, it's happening again with Furiosa being a box office bomb. Why is Sony doing this out of all the freaking companies? It's like if Illumination is looking at the results of their films doing so well, and they're like, nah, we gotta make our films cheaper. Why? Sony doesn't need to freaking do this, and the fact that they're still at it, that is just desperate greed right there. That is just pure, unadulterated, flat-out evil greed. The kind that is the definition of why it is one of the 7 deadly sins. Let's see now. So basically, the strikes last year meant nothing. Seriously, the fact that after everything that happened last year with the strikes, Sony would still want to use AI on their projects. Also, this is happening at the worst possible time, with the IATSE currently negotiating for a new deal of how, if things will turn out well, we could see another strike and potentially see Hollywood shut down once again. Exactly. Let's see what we got. I want to punch this man in the face. Did he not pay attention to how pissed people are at that AI would put a lot of people out to work, or a lot of people out of work? Even people who aren't in the entertainment industry are saying no doubt people want to work and get decent wages. Honestly, at this point, the guild should make strict guidelines that if a unionized studio decided to outsource animation or productions or use AI, then that needs to be put on a vote by the unionized artists, not by executives, but by artists. Yeah, that's going to be another obstacle that'll happen for later when it will be time for the animators and the animation guild to renegotiate a new contract. I heard it's going to be coming later this year, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Let's see what else we have here. While I am glad that Beyond the Spider-Verse would not have AI, but I am not sure about GOAT. I find this is scary because AI could take away people's jobs, including in animation. I don't know which CEO to despise the most, Viziquera or Zaslav. I cannot believe that this is happening after the strike. And an animation strike has to happen, even if my favorite movies from the studios may end up being delayed. I wonder if Hayao Miyazaki would be very angry about this. Oh, I mean, like, Hayao Miyazaki, like, you know he's against it. Like, have you seen his rant about AI? It is freaking hilarious. Like, honestly, I highly recommend you guys check it out. Like, it is actually glorious and sums up perfectly of how soulless and worthless AI actually is. And honestly, it's the kind of things, as harsh as it may sound, it's why AI people or people who support AI, they deserve to be poor. They deserve to lose their jobs, and they deserve to live in the streets until they learn that AI is actually bad for our society and that they need to reject it. And again, I know it's a pretty harsh statement right there, but like with how AI is currently going, nah, those dickbags deserve it. Let's see. This is so far the worst decision that Sony Pictures has ever made. I'm dead freaking serious about this. This is an absolute middle finger to the hardworking animators and artists that's sadly been poorly mistreated already. I talked to my friends at Disney Animation on Friday, and they said they really don't want to do AI because they all know that they already have an amazing crew to work with. I just can't imagine why Sony will do this, but here we are, and I'm 100% pissed off. You tell me. Like, even as I was ranting about it, like, I was feeling my head, like, heating up. Seriously, this is a long time since I've legit felt about this, about Sony Pictures. And I think it is safe to say that this time around, it is absolutely justified. Alright, I think I'm gonna read one more comment before we go and cap this one off. I'm almost out of time. Let's see now. Seeing one of the biggest film companies go straight to AI is very shocking and heartbreaking. Now I'm worried that we will get an animator strike and that the Animation Guild will sue Sony Pictures for this idea. I know Chris Miller did promise that Beyond the Spider-Verse won't have AI involved in the project, but this is still concerning for both Sony Animation and Sony Imageworks, especially for all the animators. I do hope Sony does reverse this decision or using AI before this ruins the company. Yeah, let's just hope for the best. But I mean, honestly, it's either Sony has to go and bail out on AI altogether, or we're going to have to bail out on Sony Pictures. Because honestly, if they're going to go into the AI route, then I wouldn't mind going back into saying that, yeah, they should shut down. At least this time, there's not going to be employees that will be hurt from this because Sony just wants to replace them all with freaking AI.